Hey guys, tonight we are going to drift back through the centuries, past the age of steam and revolutions, beyond the Enlightenment, and settle into a time that feels both strangely familiar and profoundly alien, the Middle Ages. Imagine, just for a moment, that the gentle hum of your refrigerator is gone, replaced by the distant bleating of a goat. The soft glow of your screen is extinguished, and the only light comes from a sputtering tallow candle that smells vaguely of boiled animal fat. The air isn't clean, it's thick with the smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and something else, something a lot more organic. This is the world you've just woken up in. Honestly, given the state of sanitation and the general lack of antibiotics, you probably won't survive this, but it's fun to pretend. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where and when you're listening from, so drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's not a biting, dramatic cold, but a persistent, damp chill that seems to seep through the rough timber walls of the small room where you lie. The straw-stuffed mattress beneath you rustles with every slight movement, and you get the distinct, unnerving feeling that you are not the only living thing nestled within it. You pull the coarse wool blanket up to your chin. It's scratchy, heavy, and does a surprisingly poor job of keeping you warm. Outside, the world is beginning to stir. There's no gentle alarm, no digital clock radio, just the gradual and chaotic symphony of a medieval town waking up. A rooster, perched on a nearby fence post, crows with an almost aggressive enthusiasm. A dog barks, a cart rattles over uneven cobblestones, and a church bell begins to toll in the distance, a steady, solemn rhythm that will punctuate your entire day. You swing your legs out of bed, your bare feet meeting the cold, splintery floorboards. There are no pajamas, just the simple linen tunic you wore yesterday and the day before that. Personal hygiene is different here. A basin of icy water sits on a small stool, and that will have to do. As you splash your face, you catch your reflection in the water's surface, a blurry, indistinct stranger. You have to get to work, but what work is there to do? For most people in this era, your life was largely predetermined. If your father was a blacksmith, you would likely become a blacksmith. The smell of coal smoke and hot metal would be the scent of your childhood, the clang of the hammer on the anvil, your lullaby. If your family worked the land for a local lord, your destiny was tied to the soil, to the rhythm of the planting and the harvest. But for those who found themselves in the growing towns and cities without a family trade or a plot of land, the choices were far more creative. This was a world still reeling from cataclysm. The great mainstream historical fact of this era, the shadow that looms over everything, is the Black Death. Sweeping through Europe in the mid-14th century, the plague wiped out an estimated 30% to 50% of the population. It was an unimaginable horror, but it had a strange and transformative side effect. With so few people left to till the fields, shear the sheep, and build the cathedrals, the value of labor skyrocketed. For the first time, a common peasant or a city dweller had a sliver of bargaining power. Lords and guild masters needed hands, and they were sometimes willing to pay for them, opening the door for people to move around and seek out new, unconventional lines of work. There was no medieval LinkedIn, no help-wanted signs in shop windows. You found work through word of mouth, through reputation, or through sheer, desperate necessity. Life's pace is different too. Clocks are a luxury for the rich. You measure your day by the sun and the church bells. For smaller intervals, you might use a quirky little measurement, the paternoster. Need to boil an egg for just the right amount of time, you'd say the Lord's Prayer a few times over. It's a beautifully simple system, a way of weaving the sacred into the fabric of the mundane. But this simple world is also one of rigid hierarchies. You know your place. You know to bow your head to the priest, to the knight, to the wealthy merchant in his fine, brightly dyed robes. You are a commoner, and your world is mostly shades of brown and grey, the color of dirt, wood, and undyed wool. The question of how much the average person truly understood of the world around them is complex. Historians still argue whether the stark divide between the literate clergy and the supposedly illiterate masses was as absolute as once believed, with many common folk possessing a practical, if not classical, understanding of letters. Could you read your own name? Maybe. Could you read the Bible in Latin? Almost certainly not. Your knowledge is a tapestry woven from folklore, church sermons, and the gossip you overhear at the market. A place that assaults the senses with the smell of fresh bread, rotting vegetables, live chickens, and a general lack of civic sanitation that would make the final day of a modern music festival seem like a pristine operating theater. Tonight, we're going to put you to work. We are going to explore the jobs you might take on if you had no land, no inheritance, and no desire to starve. These are not the jobs of knights in shining armor or ladies in waiting. These are the strange, the unpleasant, the spiritually questionable, and the downright disgusting professions that kept the wheels of the medieval world turning. These are the jobs that required a strong stomach, a tolerance for social scorn, and a certain grim determination to see the sun rise one more time. Your medieval HR department consists of a shrug and a pointed finger. Your contract is a handshake. Your job security is non-existent. So take a deep breath of that smoky, manure-tinged air. Feel the grit under your fingernails and the chill in your bones. You need to earn a coin for a loaf of bread and a cup of ale. And the only way to do that is to take on a job that no one else wants. The sun is still low in the sky, but for your first line of work, that doesn't matter. Your shift doesn't start until everyone else is safe in their beds, when the moon is high and the streets are dark and empty. Your new profession is a creature of the night. Your profession being a creature of the night means you spend most of the daylight hours in a fitful, shallow sleep, trying to ignore the sounds of the bustling city. When the sun finally dips below the horizon and the last of the evening church bells fade into silence, that's when your day truly begins. A sharp rap on your door makes you jump. It's not a friendly knock, it's the sound of impatience. You open it to a silhouette, a burly man named Thomas, who is to be your master in this new trade. He doesn't say hello. He just grunts, time to work, and turns, expecting you to follow. His own scent precedes him, an earthy, eye-watering aroma that you are about to become intimately familiar with. You follow him out into the narrow, winding streets of the city. The world is transformed at night. The familiar alleys and squares are now strange and full of menacing shadows. The moon is your only reliable street lamp, casting a silvery, ethereal glow on the cobblestones and the dark timber-framed houses that lean in so close they almost seem to be whispering to each other. You hear the scuttling of rats in the gutters and the occasional mournful cry of a cat. Every dark doorway seems like a potential hiding spot for a thief or a cutthroat. Thomas walks with a heavy, confident tread, carrying a long-handled shovel over his shoulder. He seems to fear nothing, or perhaps he knows that the work you're about to do is a better deterrent than any sword. You are now officially a gong farmer. It's a strangely gentle-sounding name for such a foul business. The word gong comes from an Old English term for a privy or cesspit. You, my friend, are a toilet cleaner, a professional pooper-scooper for an entire city. You arrive at your first job site, the back of a wealthy wool merchant's home. It's a tall, impressive building, far grander than the hovel where you sleep. But you're not here to admire the architecture. Thomas leads you to a small, unassuming shed-like structure in the back garden. This is the privy. Some of the grandest castles have what's known as a guardrobe. This quirky tidbit of medieval life is essentially a toilet built into the thick stone wall, a small room where the waste drops down a long chute to the moat below. It was believed the ammonia fumes from the urine would kill moths, so nobles would hang their expensive robes in there for protection. A walk-in closet that doubles as a toilet. It's the medieval version of an ensuite, just with more screaming and a distinct lack of plumbing. The merchant's privy is less elegant. It's a simple pit lined with stone, maybe 10 feet deep, capped with a wooden shack. Your job is to empty it. The law is very clear on this, a mainstream historical fact in places like London. The work of a gong farmer could only be performed between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. The stench was considered such a public nuisance that performing the work in daylight hours would result in a hefty fine. Thomas hands you a rope and a bucket. He lights a small, smelly lantern, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows. He works the wooden lid off the top of the pit, and the smell hits you. It's not just a bad smell. It is a physical presence. It's a thick, suffocating wave of ammonia and decay that stings your eyes and catches in the back of your throat, making you gag. You've smelled bad things before, rotting food in the market, the tannery by the river, but this is different. This is concentrated, aged, and profoundly human. You realize this is a smell that has layers, an aroma with a backstory, a stench with ambition. Thomas, to his credit, seems entirely unfazed. He just spits on the ground and hands you a crude ladder. Down you go, he says. Don't just stand there gawking. The pit won't empty itself. Hesitantly, you lower the ladder into the darkness. It squelches as it sinks into the contents below. This is not what you had in mind when you hoped for a career with opportunities for upward mobility. Taking a deep breath, a terrible mistake, you begin your descent. The rungs of the ladder are slick. The air grows thicker with every step down, and then your foot touches the bottom. It isn't a solid bottom. It is a soft, yielding mass of filth that rises up past your ankles. For a moment, you just stand there in the dark, lantern light flickering above you, buried to your shins in the collective waste of an entire household. The sheer, overwhelming reality of your new job settles upon you like a shroud. You are literally at the bottom of the social ladder. Thomas lowers the shovel and the first bucket. Fill it up, he grunts, and don't take all night. The work is grueling. You plunge the shovel into the muck, the sound a thick, disgusting slurp. The material is heavy, dense, and resists every movement. You heave a shovelful into the bucket, then another, until it's as full as you can manage. You tug on the rope, and Thomas hauls it up, his muscles straining. He empties it into a large wooden cart waiting nearby, and then the bucket comes back down for more. And so it begins. Scoop, heave, fill, tug the rope, wait, repeat. Your arms ache, your back screams in protest, and the stench becomes a permanent part of you, clinging to your clothes, your hair, your very skin. You are no longer just smelling it, you are absorbing it. Whether the various nightmen, like you, are part of formal guilds, is something historians still argue about. Were you part of a recognized, structured trade like the masons or weavers, with apprenticeships and official masters? Or were you all just part of a loose, informal brotherhood of the stinking, united only by the shared misery of your profession? Looking at Thomas's grim face, you suspect it's the latter. There's no secret handshake, just a shared understanding of the foulness of the work. And for this slow, smelly, back-breaking labor in the dead of night, you will be paid. And surprisingly well, too. But that's a thought for later. Right now, there's another bucket to fill. The bucket goes up, the bucket comes down. The rhythm is hypnotic, mindless. Your world has shrunk to the circle of lantern light above you and the dark, viscous universe you inhabit below. Your muscles burn with a fire that has long since passed pain and entered a state of dull, persistent numbness. Thomas occasionally barks an order from above, his voice sounding distant and muffled. You are beginning to feel a little lightheaded, a strange wooziness creeping into the edges of your vision. This, you realize, is the other part of the job they don't mention in the verbal job offer. It's not just the smell or the exhaustion. It's the air itself. The pit is a confined space, and the decomposing waste releases what medieval people would simply call foul air or miasma. We now know it as a deadly cocktail of gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide. These invisible poisons can steal the air from your lungs and snuff out your life as easily as pinching a candle flame. You see a flicker in the lantern light above. Thomas leans over the edge. "Don't be getting sleepy down there," he growls. "Seen a lad pass out from the fumes once. Collapsed right into the muck. By the time we pulled him out, he was gone." A cheerful thought. This is the original form of hazard pay, though your only compensation for a workplace accident is a slightly nicer funeral, maybe. The immediate danger is stark. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rate associated with gong farming was primarily due to the immediate dangers of asphyxiation or the long-term effects of constant exposure to pathogens found in the waste. Either way, it's not a job with a generous pension plan. You shake your head, trying to clear the fog, and push on, shoveling with a renewed, if fearful, energy. So why would anyone do this? Why would you willingly descend into a toxic pit of human waste day after day? The answer, like most answers in this era, is simple: money. As you send up another bucketful, you hear the clink of coins from above. The wool merchant has come out to pay Thomas. The work is almost done, and the pay is good. In fact, it's shockingly good. A gong farmer, a nightman, could earn several pence for a single night's work. A skilled craftsman, like a carpenter or a stonemason, might earn a similar amount for a full day of respectable labor in the sunshine. You, a despised creature of the night, can match their wages while the rest of the city sleeps. This strange economic reality is a direct consequence of the job's foulness. The work is so undesirable, so socially stigmatizing, that the demand for workers far outstrips the supply, forcing employers to pay a premium. This fact was even enshrined in law. In the 16th century, long after your time, but growing from these very traditions, a mainstream historical law in England actually standardized the fees. A householder would be required to pay the master raker a set fee, often a shilling, for every ton of waste removed. It was a formal, regulated part of the urban economy. Your profession might be disgusting, but it is necessary, and its necessity gives you value. Just as you are contemplating this, your shovel strikes something hard with a dull thud. It's not a stone. You kneel, feeling around in the sludge with your hands, a disgusting but necessary action. Your fingers close around a small, smooth, metallic object. You pull it out. Even in the dim light, you can see it's a silver coin, blackened by its environment, but unmistakably money. A lost shilling, perhaps dropped from a pocket centuries ago. A moment later, you find something else, a small, intricately carved bone comb. This was another secret perk of the job, treasure hunting. It's a bit like panning for gold, if the river was, well, you know. And the gold was mostly just buttons and regret. People lost things in privies all the time: coins, jewelry, keys, even small weapons. Anything found was usually considered finders keepers, a small bonus for the horrors of the job. These pits were unintentional time capsules of filth. This is a quirky little tidbit that modern archaeologists adore. Because the waste at the bottom of a cesspit is anaerobic, meaning it lacks oxygen, organic materials that would normally rot away are often perfectly preserved. Excavations of medieval cesspits have yielded a treasure trove of information about the past. Leather shoes, scraps of fabric, the bones of fish and fowl, and even the preserved seeds and pips from fruits like cherries and grapes, telling us exactly what people were eating. Future historians will one day call this a treasure trove of information. Right now, you just call it Tuesday. Finally, the shovel scrapes against the stone floor of the pit. It's empty, or as empty as it's going to get. Thomas lowers the ladder again, and you climb out, every muscle screaming in protest. You emerge into the cool night air, a creature reborn from the underworld. You are covered, head to toe, in a layer of indescribable grime. Thomas, however, looks pleased. He tosses you a penny, your first earning. It's heavy and real in your filthy palm. It's enough to buy a loaf of bread and some cheese. It is the coin of survival. "Come on," he grunts, already turning to the heavy cart, now laden with the contents of the pit. "We've got 2 more houses to clear before the sun comes up." You stumble after him, the single coin clutched in your hand, a small, hard proof that even the foulest work has its rewards. The night is far from over, the last pit is empty. The sky to the east is no longer black, but a soft, bruised purple. Dawn is coming, and with it, the end of your shift. You and Thomas maneuver the heavy, sloshing cart through the narrow lanes. The city is beginning to wake, and your presence is now deeply unwelcome. The first bakers are opening their shutters, the warm, heavenly scent of fresh bread mixing with your own profane aroma to create a truly confusing olfactory experience. Early risers, a milkmaid with her pail, a priest on his way to matins, see you coming, and they react. They press themselves against walls, they pull their cloaks over their faces, they turn and walk the other way. You have a certain power. People don't make eye contact, they give you a wide berth. It's like being a celebrity, but the only autograph anyone wants from you is a guarantee that you'll stay upwind. Your journey is not a random one. There are strict rules about where this cargo can go. You can't just dump it in the river, though many did, leading to hideously polluted waterways or into a common ditch. You are headed for a designated spot outside the city walls. As you pass through the massive stone gate of the city, the guards wave you on without a second glance, their noses wrinkled in disgust. Just beyond the walls you see it, and smell it, a series of massive, steaming mounds. This is the final destination. This mountain of misery is your team's final project, a collaborative effort in olfactory offense, the collected filth of an entire district. Thomas expertly backs the cart up to the edge of the newest pile, and together you tip the large basin, sending the night's work cascading down the side of the dung heap in a thick, dark tide. And here lies the final, surprising chapter in the life of medieval waste. This material you've so painstakingly collected isn't just being thrown away, it is a valuable commodity. This is night soil, and it is one of the most potent fertilizers known to the medieval world. In a little while, farmers from the surrounding countryside will arrive with their own carts. They will pay for the right to haul this nutrient-rich refuse back to their fields. Historians still argue whether the sale of night soil was a primary source of income for the Gong farmers themselves, or if the fees for collection were the main business, with the cart owner like Thomas or a middleman reaping the profits from the agricultural sales. Either way, the cycle is clear. The city's waste feeds the farms, and the farm's crops feed the city. You aren't just in waste management, you're in agricultural supply. It's all about how you frame it on your non-existent resume. This brings us to a crucial mainstream fact about this period. The medieval agricultural system was precarious. Most farming communities used a 2- or 3-field rotation system, leaving one field fallow or unplanted each year to allow the soil to recover its nutrients. But even this wasn't always enough to support a growing population. Replenishing the soil with manure was absolutely vital. Most of this came from livestock, but human waste, with its high concentration of nitrogen and phosphates, was considered particularly potent. The stinking piles of filth you helped create were directly responsible for fuller ears of wheat, larger turnips, and healthier crops that could stave off the constant threat of famine. In a strange way, your foul, degrading work is a cornerstone of the kingdom's survival. In later centuries, this process would become more refined. There's a quirky fringe tidbit from France, where they developed a method of drying the waste into a transportable, less offensive powder they called powderette. It's the same principle, just with a bit more industrial flair. The sun is now properly up, casting long golden rays across the fields. Your work is done. Thomas wipes his hands on a rag, a futile gesture, and counts out your pay. The silver coins feel heavy and strange in your hand, a stark contrast to the filth that covers you. He gives you a nod, which from him is high praise, and begins his own journey home. You are left alone, standing at the edge of the city, the stench of the dung heaps behind you and the waking world ahead. You trudge back towards the gates, a pariah re-entering civilization. The looks you get are no friendlier in the daylight. You are a walking embodiment of what everyone wants to forget, the necessary, stinking secret of city life. You finally reach your small, cold room. You strip off your fouled clothes, leaving them in a pile that seems to emanate its own dark energy. A bucket of cold water is all you have to wash away the night's work. It's not enough. You feel like the grime is more than skin deep, that the smell has seeped into your very soul. But you are alive. You have money. You can eat today. You fall onto your straw mattress, ignoring the rustles from within, and pull the scratchy blanket over your head. Sleep comes quickly, a heavy, dreamless slumber, but as you drift off, a thought forms in your exhausted mind. Is this it? Is this your life now? A creature of the night, forever tied to the city's foulest secrets? Or is there another way, perhaps a life outside these crowded, stinking walls? A different kind of work, out in the open air of the countryside. A job that still involves filth and discomfort, but of a completely different, and perhaps even more intimate, variety. You wake up to the midday sun streaming through your tiny window, the sounds of the city already in full swing. But the smell is still with you. It's in your clothes, in your hair, in the very straw of your mattress. You are the gong farmer, and the city will never let you forget it. The thought of another night in the pits, of the cloying darkness and the burning in your lungs, fills you with a cold dread. The penny from last night is still in your hand. It's not much, but it's a choice. You decide then and there. You are done. You decide to trade the symphony of the city cesspit for the gentle sounds of nature. Anything has to be better than being a professional stinkwizard. You gather your meager belongings, which amounts to basically nothing, and you walk out of your room, out of the building, and you don't look back. You head for the same city gate you exited this morning, but this time you don't plan on returning. The countryside is a revelation. The air is clean, filled with the scent of damp earth, wild flowers, and grass. It's so pure it almost makes you dizzy. For days you walk, sleeping in barns or under the stars, trading a bit of labor for a piece of bread and some cheese. You are heading for the fenlands, the great, flat, waterlogged expanse of eastern England. It's a strange and marshy landscape, perpetually shrouded in a low-lying mist, a place of whispering reeds and endless grey water. You arrive in a tiny village that seems to be sinking slowly into the marsh itself, its few dozen houses perched on small islands of solid ground. Work here is not easy to find. The people are insular, suspicious of outsiders. Finally, an old woman with eyes as grey as the fen water looks you up and down. She sees your desperation. She asks if you're afraid of the water or what lives in it. You shake your head, trying to look brave. She smiles a toothless, knowing smile and points a gnarled finger towards the vast, shimmering marsh. There's a living to be made out there, she rasps, if you've the stomach for it. She tells you about the apothecaries and barber surgeons in the larger towns, miles away. They are always in need of a particular medical supply, one that can only be harvested from these stagnant waters. They need leeches. And how does one harvest a leech? You imagine a net or perhaps some kind of trap. The old woman laughs, a dry, rattling sound like stones in a gourd. The best way, she explains, is to offer them what they want. You are the bait. The job description is essentially human fishing bait. You wonder if there's a dental plan. Probably not. The next morning, she leads you to the edge of the water. The sun is weak, diffused by the ever-present mist. The water is still and black, its surface like polished obsidian. She hands you a small clay jar with a cloth lid. That's your only tool. She hikes up her own skirts, revealing pale, scarred old legs, and wades into the water without a moment's hesitation. "Come on," she says. "They don't bite so much when the water's cold." That is not the comfort she thinks it is. You take a deep breath, the clean, marshy air feeling suddenly heavy in your lungs, and you follow her in. The water is shockingly cold, and the bottom is a deep, soft ooze that squelches up between your toes. It feels both disgusting and strangely intimate. You wade deeper, up to your knees, then your thighs. The silence is profound, broken only by the gentle lapping of the water against your skin and the distant cry of a waterfall. You stand there, shivering, waiting. For what? You're not sure. Then you feel it. Not a bite, not a sting, but a faint, feathery tickle on your calf. You try to ignore it, thinking it's just a piece of weed. Then you feel another. This is the quirky, unnerving secret of the medicinal leech, Hirudo medicinalis. It has 3 jaws, arranged in a Y shape, and each jaw is lined with around 100 tiny, sharp teeth. But when it bites, it also injects a powerful anesthetic. You don't feel the cut. You just feel the strange, gentle exploration. You glance down, and your heart leaps into your throat. Clinging to your leg is a dark, slug-like creature, its body already beginning to swell slightly. It's maybe 2 inches long, a deep olive green with a faint pattern on its back. As you watch, horrified, another one attaches itself to your ankle, then another to your shin. Congratulations, you've become a walking, all-you-can-eat buffet for things that look like angry, sentient punctuation marks. This was a real, and for a time, vital profession. While the leech craze reached its peak in the 19th century, the practice of bloodletting and the use of leeches has roots that stretch deep into the medieval period, making leech collecting a long-standing, if obscure, trade. Your new job might seem bizarre, but you are a key supplier for the medical technology of your day. The old woman is already plucking the plumpest leeches from her own legs and dropping them into her jar. You are a long way from the city, that's for sure. The filth here is not the waste of others, it is alive and it is feeding on you. The question of your place in the world remains. Historians still argue about the social standing of leech collectors, whether they were seen as savvy, self-employed medical suppliers providing a vital service, or as desperate outcasts forced into a profession that literally fed on them. Right now, as you feel another one latch onto the back of your knee, you are definitely leaning towards the latter. You stand there in the cold, grey water, a human pincushion for a host of ravenous invertebrates. The old woman, your unwitting mentor in this bizarre trade, wades calmly nearby, occasionally plucking a particularly fat, swollen leech from her ankle and popping it into her jar. She sees the look of pale horror on your face. "Don't you worry," she says, her voice raspy. "You're doing a good service. You're harvesting medicine. Medicine?" You look down at the creatures feasting on your lifeblood. It seems like a strange sort of cure. But to understand why you are willingly serving as a happy meal for swamp worms, you have to understand medieval medicine. And to understand medieval medicine, you have to understand the humors. For over 1,000 years, the most sophisticated medical minds in the Western world, from the ancient Greeks to the university-trained physicians of your time, subscribed to the theory of the 4 humors. This is the great, overarching mainstream fact of pre-modern medicine. The body, they believed, was composed of 4 essential fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humor was linked to an element and a quality. Blood was air, hot and moist. Phlegm was water, cold and moist. Yellow bile was fire, hot and dry. And melancholic black bile was earth, cold and dry. A healthy person had all 4 humors in perfect balance. Illness, whether it was a fever, a cough, or even a bout of sadness was caused by an excess of one humor. The cure, therefore, was logical: get rid of the surplus. If you had a fever, your face was red, and you felt hot, you were clearly suffering from an excess of blood. The treatment was to remove some. This could be done by a barber surgeon with a sharp lancet, a terrifying practice known as venesection, or through the more gentle and targeted application of leeches. So if you're grumpy, you have too much black bile. If you're listless, too much phlegm. It's like a personality quiz, but every result is you need to be stabbed or have a worm drink your blood. The leeches you are currently cultivating on your own legs are destined for the apothecary's jar, ready to be placed on the temple of a headache sufferer or the chest of a patient with pneumonia. You are starting to feel the effects of your work. A wave of dizziness washes over you, and the misty landscape seems to tilt slightly. You've probably donated a fair amount of blood by now. The leeches attached to you have undergone a grotesque transformation. This is a quirky little tidbit about them. A single medicinal leech can consume up to 10 times its own body weight in blood. The slim, 2-inch worms that first attached to you are now swollen into thick, thumb-sized slugs, their bodies bloated and dark with your blood. They look like living blood sausages. They can survive for more than a year on this single, gluttonous meal. The old woman nods, seeing your state. That's enough for your first day. She shows you how to get them off. You can't just rip them off, as that might leave their tiny teeth in your skin, which is the medieval equivalent of a terrible party guest who leaves their shoes in your hallway. Instead, you wade back to the bank, and she shows you how to touch the leech's mouth with a bit of cloth soaked in vinegar, or simply to wait for them to detach on their own once they are full. One by one, you gently remove the gorged creatures and place them in your own clay jar. The job isn't over when the leeches are off. Now you have to deal with the aftermath. Your legs are covered in dozens of small, 3-pronged wounds, each one a perfect little Y shape from their tripartite jaws, and they are all bleeding freely. The leech's saliva contains a powerful anticoagulant called hirudin, the very substance that makes them so medically useful. It also means the bleeding doesn't stop for hours. Your legs are a mess of slowly trickling blood. The old woman gives you some moss to press against the wounds, but it's a losing battle. The risk of infection from the stagnant, dirty marsh water is immense. You're essentially making yourself sick to provide a product that's supposed to make other people healthy. It's the medieval equivalent of a stressed-out yoga instructor. You can now see the true cost of this profession. The daily blood loss would lead to chronic anemia, weakness, and fatigue. The constant open wounds invited disease. You look at the old woman's legs, crisscrossed with a roadmap of tiny, pale scars, the legacy of a lifetime of being fed upon. It's a strange form of symbiotic relationship, one where you are both the shepherd and the pasture. There's a scholarly debate among historians about how aware medieval practitioners were of the different leech species. Did they specifically seek out the prized Hirudo medicinalis, known for its gentle bite and potent saliva, or in a pinch, was any blood-sucking creature that could be pulled from the marsh considered good enough for a desperate patient? Looking at the mix of sizes and shades in your jar, you suspect it was often the latter. You put the cloth lid on your jar, the weight of it surprisingly heavy. It's a squirming, slimy mass of capital. You are weak, cold, and bleeding, but you have a product. You have something to sell. The journey from the city has led you to a new kind of foulness, a new kind of danger. It's no longer about managing the waste of society, but about sacrificing your own body piece by piece for a handful of coins. Your legs are a mess of weeping, itchy wounds, and you feel a little weak, a little floaty, but your clay jar is heavy with your squirming, slimy harvest. The old woman nods in approval and gives you directions to the nearest market town, a good half-day's walk away. Ask for the barber surgeon, she croaks. He's always buying. You thank her and she just shrugs, her face a mask of weary indifference, before turning back toward her own small hut. You are on your own. The walk is long and arduous. With every step, your mud-caked tunic chafes against the dozens of tiny wounds on your legs. You are keenly aware of the precious cargo you carry, careful not to stumble, periodically changing the water in the jar from streams you pass to keep your product fresh and lively. Finally, you see the town rising ahead of you, a jumble of timber and stone larger than any village you've seen since leaving the city. You limp through the gates, a strange sight for the townsfolk. A gaunt, mud-stained youth, clutching a clay pot like it's a holy relic. You find your way to the street where the craftsmen have their shops. You pass the baker, the weaver, the candle maker, and then you see it. A pole painted with a twisting red and white stripe. This is the sign of the barber surgeon. It's a one-stop shop for a haircut, a shave, and having a limb removed, the original short back and insides. You push open the heavy wooden door. The room is small and smells sharply of medicinal herbs, soap, and something else, something metallic and vaguely unsettling. A man with a thick leather apron and surprisingly delicate hands is meticulously sharpening a razor. This must be the master. He looks up, his eyes quickly taking in your ragged appearance and the jar in your hands. He doesn't look surprised. A collector, he asks, his voice calm and professional. You nod, your throat suddenly dry. Let's see them. You place the jar on a wooden table. This is a delicate negotiation. You're trying to get the best price for a jar of blood-sucking worms from a man who owns a very large pair of scissors. It pays to be polite. He removes the cloth lid and peers inside, swirling the contents. He then reaches in with a pair of metal tongs and plucks one out. He lays the wriggling creature on a small wooden tray, examining it closely. From the fens, I take it. He asks, they're the right color. Herudo medicinales. You nod again, trying to look like you know what you're doing. You're learning that even in the strangest of trades, there's a surprising amount of connoisseurship. This man, the barber surgeon, is a key figure in medieval society. This is a mainstream historical fact. While university-educated physicians theorized and diagnosed from afar, often without even touching the patient, it was the barber surgeon who did the dirty work. They were the hands-on practitioners who lanced boils, set broken bones, pulled rotten teeth, and most frequently performed bloodletting. They were the bridge between high-minded medical theory and the messy reality of the human body. The barber surgeon picks up another leech, this one particularly plump. He gives it a gentle squeeze, and a tiny bead of dark blood oozes out. He shoots you a sharp look. Trying to pull a fast one, are you? He says, his voice losing its gentle tone. This one's been fed recently. This is where you learn about the quirky and rather disgusting tricks of the trade. Some collectors, in an attempt to make their leeches look bigger and more valuable, would let them feed for just a moment before going to market. Some would even use a thin reed to blow air into the poor creatures to puff them up. It's a biological bait-and switch. The things people do for a few extra pennies. You shake your head, feigning ignorance, and he thankfully seems to accept that you might be too new to the business to be so deceitful. They're small, he says, the classic opening move of any haggler. And I have another collector who brings me fatter ones from the southern marshes. You find your voice. They're lively, though, you say, surprised at your own boldness. And fresh from the water this morning. The haggling goes back and forth. He offers a pittance. You counter with a slightly less pitiful pittance. The existence of this entire transaction raises a question that historians still argue about. What was the true extent of the leech trade network? Was it mostly a local affair like this, with individual collectors selling directly to the nearest town? Or were there organized, long-distance supply chains, with savvy merchants buying up massive quantities of leeches from the Great Fens and shipping them in special containers to booming cities like London, Paris, or even further afield? Your small, desperate transaction is a microcosm of that vast, unknown network. Finally, you agree on a price. A few pence for the whole jar. It's more money than you've held at one time in weeks. He counts the coins into your grimy hand and then carefully decants your hard-won leeches into a much larger glass jar on his shelf, where they join hundreds of others, a swimming, squirming mass of medicinal potential. You have done it. You have turned your own blood and pain into cold, hard cash. You leave the shop, the metallic smell of his trade clinging to you, and head for the nearest alehouse. You buy a hunk of bread, a wedge of strong cheese, and a tankard of dark ale. The food tastes like victory. As you sit there, nursing your sore legs, you reflect on this new life. It's brutal, it's painful, and it's strange beyond measure. But you are not shoveling another man's filth in the dark. You are, in a strange and bloody way, your own master. The thought is intoxicating. But as you drain your cup, you wonder what other strange ways there are to survive in this world. What if the work wasn't just physically foul, but spiritually dangerous? The ale is warm in your belly, a pleasant and rare sensation. Life as a leech collector is a cycle of pain and payment. You spend your days getting weaker, your blood seeping into the marsh, and then you limp to town to trade your suffering for enough coin to do it all again. It's a life, but you can feel it wearing you down, leaving you pale and perpetually tired. One evening, huddled in the corner of a smoky tavern, you overhear two men talking in hushed tones. They speak of a death in a remote village up in the hills, a place where the old ways still hold sway. The man died suddenly, they whisper, without a priest, his soul heavy with a lifetime of small, unspoken sins. They say his family is desperate, looking for someone to perform the service. They don't name the service, but their voices are full of a strange mix of fear and reverence. A new kind of work. A job that doesn't require a strong back or healthy legs, but something else entirely. A strong stomach, perhaps, for a different kind of filth. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and the dawning realization that your body can't sustain the leech harvest forever, you head towards the hills. The landscape changes. The flat, wet fenlands give way to rolling hills that soon become steep, craggy mountains. This is the borderland, a place of isolated hamlets nestled in deep valleys, where folklore clings like the persistent fog. You arrive in a village that is little more than a handful of stone and wattle huts clustered around a tiny, dilapidated church. The air is heavy with sorrow. A man, seeing a stranger, approaches you. He doesn't ask if you're a traveler or a merchant. He looks at your gaunt face and your ragged clothes and asks a quiet, searching question. Are you the one we sent for? You don't know how to answer, so you just nod slowly. It's enough. He leads you to a small, dark cottage, the smell of death and burning herbs thick in the air. Inside, a family huddles together, their faces etched with grief and a profound spiritual terror. On a simple wooden bed lies the body of an old man, a sheet pulled up to his chest. The son explains the situation. His father was a good man, but he had a temper. He sometimes took the Lord's name in vain. He missed Mass last Easter. Small sins, perhaps, but unconfessed. He died in his sleep, with no chance for a priest to grant him absolution, to perform the last rites. To understand their fear, you have to understand their faith. A central, mainstream tenet of medieval belief was the existence of purgatory. Officially defined by the Church, purgatory was a terrifying waiting room between earth and heaven. It was a place of purification, often by fire, for souls who had died in God's grace, but were still stained by lesser, venial sins. The thought of a loved one lingering in torment for centuries was unbearable. Their father's soul, they believe, cannot ascend. It is trapped, tethered to the earth by the weight of his unabsolved life. And that is why they need you. You are to be his escape. You are to be a sin eater. So the job is spiritual landfill. You take on everyone else's metaphysical garbage for a small fee. Sounds like a great career path with zero long-term consequences for your immortal soul. The family explains your role. you are to eat a ritual meal. By consuming bread and ale that has been symbolically loaded with the sins of the deceased, you will take those sins into yourself. You will absorb his anger, his blasphemies, his petty cruelties. Your soul will become heavier, darker, more burdened, but his will be wiped clean, free to float up to paradise. In return, you will receive a small payment, a groat perhaps, and the meal itself. A loaf of bread, a mug of ale, and a handful of eternal damnation. Seems like a fair trade when you're hungry enough. The very existence of this practice is a subject of intense historical debate. Historians still argue about the reality of the sin eater as a formal profession. Some scholars believe it was a genuine, though rare, folk custom practiced in isolated regions like these. Others suggest the stories were exaggerations, a misunderstanding of local traditions where alms were given to the poor to pray for the soul of the deceased, later sensationalized by 19th century antiquarians who were fascinated by the macabre. Yet the tradition was incredibly persistent. For a quirky tidbit that stretches far beyond the medieval era, the last known person identified as a sin eater in England was a man named Richard Munslow, who died as recently as 1906. His restored gravestone in Shropshire is a testament to how long this strange folk belief endured in the forgotten corners of the country. The family watches you, their eyes a mixture of desperate hope and profound revulsion. They look at you like you're a divine plumber who has come to unclog their spiritual pipes, but they really don't want to know what you do with the gunk afterwards. You are a necessary evil, a creature that walks the edge of salvation and damnation. The woman of the house, the dead man's widow, steps forward. Her hands tremble as she places a coarse, crusty loaf of bread directly onto her husband's chest. She then fills a wooden cup with dark, flat ale and places it beside the bread, also resting on the body. The food is now, in their eyes, absorbing all the spiritual filth, all the moral failings of the man's entire life. She backs away and gestures for you to approach. It is time to eat. You step forward into the thick silence of the room. The family shrinks back, giving you a wide berth. All eyes are on you. The only sounds are the sputtering of a tallow lamp and the wind whistling through the cracks in the wattle walls. Your gaze is fixed on the meal resting upon the still, cold chest of the dead man. The bread is a simple, dark, heavy loaf. The ale is in a rough-hewn wooden cup. This is your communion of the damned. Reaching out a trembling hand, you lift the bread. It feels strangely cold, having absorbed the chill of the corpse beneath it. You bring it to your lips and take a bite. The bread is stale and dense. You chew slowly, deliberately. Each bite feels heavy, as if it has more calories than usual, plus a few decades of petty grudges and minor blasphemies. As you eat, you are supposed to perform your part of the ritual. You speak the words, your voice low and rough, a formula passed down from one desperate soul to another. I give easement and rest now to thee, dear man, you murmur, your eyes on the peaceful, waxy face of the deceased. Come not down the lanes or in our meadows, and for the peace of thy soul, I take thy sins upon my own. You swallow the last of the bread. It sits like a stone in your stomach. Then you pick up the cup of ale. It's cool and slightly bitter. You drink it all, a single, long draught, feeling the liquid trace a cold path down into your gut. You have consumed his life's failings. The ritual is complete. The moment the empty cup leaves your lips, the atmosphere in the cottage shatters. The family's collective breath, which they seem to have been holding, is released in a unified sigh of relief. The widow weeps, but her tears now seem to be of gratitude, not terror. Their loved one is free, his soul is light. He can begin his journey to God's grace. And you are now a vessel of contamination. The son surges forward. He doesn't embrace you or thank you. He shoves a single small coin into your palm, his fingers recoiling from your touch as if you were red-hot iron. He grabs your arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and propels you towards the door. "Go," he says, his voice a harsh whisper. "Be gone from here." The transaction is complete. Their spiritual credit score is restored, and yours has just been downgraded to actively on fire. Now, please use the nearest exit. You are thrust out into the chilly evening air, the cottage door slamming shut behind you. The finality of the sound echoes in the quiet hamlet. You stand there for a moment, the coin clutched in your fist. You have performed your function. This reliance on ritual is a powerful, mainstream feature of the medieval world. In an age of plagues, famines, and sudden death, where the whims of God and nature were all-powerful and terrifyingly unpredictable, ritual was a way to impose order on chaos. The official sacraments of the church were the most powerful, but for people in remote areas, folk rituals like yours filled a desperate psychological need, providing comfort and a sense of control when a priest couldn't be found. As you walk away from the cottage, you notice a change in the village. The few people still outside see you, and their reaction is no longer just cautious. It is one of active fear. A woman gathering wood hastily bundles her things and scurries inside. A group of children playing in the dirt fall silent, their eyes wide, before their mother shrieks at them to get into the house. One old man makes the sign of the cross as you pass. You have gone from being a suspicious stranger to a mobile damnation containment unit. It's not great for making friends, but it does mean you never have to wait in line at the market. You are utterly, profoundly alone. By the door of the cottage you just left, you notice something you hadn't before, a gnarled, twisted walking stick leaning against the wall. This is a quirky, specific detail from some accounts of the trade. The Sin Eater's staff. It was a marker of your profession, a warning sign for all to see. Someone else performed this role before you, and they will likely have to find someone new after you. You are an outcast, a pariah who lives on the absolute fringes of society. You absorb the community's spiritual poison, and for this service, they shun you completely. You cannot share a meal, a drink, or a conversation with anyone. You are a ghost among the living. And what do you believe as you walk the lonely path out of the valley? This is a question historians still argue about. Did the Sin Eaters genuinely believe they were damning their own souls, accepting eternal punishment as a noble, if terrifying, sacrifice? Or did they see it as a job, a grim piece of theater performed to comfort the grieving and earn a desperately needed meal? Perhaps you tell yourself it's just a story, just a way to get by. But as you walk under the cold, unblinking stars, you feel the weight of that old man's life settling on your shoulders. You feel heavier and lonelier than you have ever been. You walk for what feels like hours, following a lonely track that winds its way out of the hills. The single coin from the grieving family is a cold, hard knot in your pocket. Unlike the money from your other jobs, this one doesn't feel like a payment. It feels like evidence. The sun begins to set, painting the rugged landscape in shades of orange and deep purple. It's beautiful, but the beauty only serves to highlight your profound isolation. The gong farmer was shunned for his smell, the leech collector for her strangeness, but they had communities of their own, however small. You, the Sin Eater, have no one. You are a professional scapegoat, a function to be used and discarded. Your job has a murky history. It's less of a formal profession and more of a historical rumor with a terrible benefits package. And so you walk, a living embodiment of a question that historians still argue about with surprising passion. Were you ever truly real? The story of your profession is a ghostly one, appearing in fragments and whispers in the historical record. The most famous account comes from a 17th century writer and antiquarian named John Aubrey. This was an age of emerging historical consciousness, a mainstream trend where curious gentlemen began to systematically collect local folklore, stories, and customs before they disappeared. Aubrey wrote of an old custom in Herefordshire, on the border with Wales, describing a long, lame, frightful, thirsty, poor man who would be summoned to a deathbed. For a groat, a bowl of beer, and a loaf of bread, he would perform the ritual you just did, taking on the sins of the deceased. Aubrey's account is vivid and specific. It's the foundational text for the legend of the Sin Eater. It suggests a genuine, if terrifying, folk practice, but many modern historians are skeptical. They point out that for such a spiritually significant role, there is a ghostly silence in official records. You don't find Sin Eaters mentioned in church documents, court proceedings, or town chronicles. The term itself is almost impossible to find in medieval sources. These historians suggest that men like Aubrey, with their love for the bizarre and the macabre, may have misunderstood or sensationalized a more mundane tradition. You have to love an antiquarian. They hear a story about a poor person getting a free cake at a funeral, and a few years later, it's written down as a cursed ghoul who literally eats damnation for a living. They had a real flair for the dramatic. The likely candidate for this misunderstanding is the very real and widespread tradition of souling. This is a quirky tidbit of folklore that directly connects to modern customs. For centuries, on All Hallows' Eve or All Souls' Day, poor people, often children, would go door to door, singing and offering prayers for the dead. In return, they would be given small, spiced soul cakes. The implicit bargain was a cake for a prayer, a way for the wealthy to perform charity and have their deceased relatives prayed for, ensuring a quicker passage through purgatory. It's easy to see how this tradition of a poor person consuming food in connection with the dead could, over time, morph into the much darker story of the Sin Eater. So what are you? Are you a practitioner of a genuine, ancient, and terrifying rite? Or are you just the star of a spooky story, a man who got a free, if emotionally charged, meal because of a misunderstanding? As you stop by a rushing stream to splash water on your face, you don't feel like a misunderstanding. You feel the weight of the ritual. The memory of the cold bread and the grieving family is potent. The isolation is real. The coin is real. Perhaps the truth, as it often is, lies somewhere in between, a genuine folk belief, practiced in only the most isolated corners of the kingdom, too small and too strange to ever make it into the official books. A secret shared only by the desperate and the damned. You look at the coin in your palm. It's not enough. It's not enough to pay for a life of utter solitude. It's not enough to pay for the gnawing fear that maybe, just maybe, the ritual was real, and your soul is now scarred and stained. After weighing the pros and cons, one stale loaf of bread versus an eternity of spiritual torment and being snubbed by everyone, you decide this career path might need a rethink. Your immortal soul's HR department has just filed a grievance. You make a decision. You will not seek out another funeral. You will not be the man for the lonely walk. You toss the coin into the fast-flowing stream, watching it flash once before disappearing into the dark water. You release the payment, and with it, you try to release the job. You turn your back on the wild, mist-shrouded hills and head back towards the lowlands. You crave the simple, tangible world of work again. You want a job that deals not with invisible sins and eternal damnation, but with things you can see and touch, even if those things are foul. You crave the noisy, dirty, complicated life of a town where a person can be anonymous, not an outcast. You are heading back to the world of industry, of trade, of things being made and sold. You're ready for a job that's honest, even if it stinks. You walk for days, putting the haunted, hilly borderlands behind you. You are heading for the heart of the kingdom, for the prosperous towns of the lowlands, where the clang of hammers and the shouts of merchants replace the whisper of the wind. You have had enough of the ethereal. You need something solid, something real. You need a job that, while perhaps unpleasant, doesn't involve wrestling with the fate of your immortal soul. You arrive in a town that hums with a palpable energy. The streets are crowded, the people look well fed, and the air is thick with the smell of money, industry, and wet wool. You have stumbled into a center of England's greatest industry, the cloth trade. This is a mainstream historical fact that cannot be overstated. The wealth of medieval England was built on the back of a sheep. English wool was the finest in Europe, a coveted raw material that fueled a massive international trade network. The Lord Chancellor, the most powerful man in the kingdom after the king himself, famously sits upon a large cushion stuffed with wool in the House of Lords, the woolsack, as a perpetual symbol of the source of the nation's power. And you are about to become a very junior and very smelly part of this mighty economic engine. You find your way to a district by the river where large, noisy wooden buildings are crammed together. This is where the cloth is finished. You see a man, his forearms thick with muscle and his face perpetually grim, directing workers. He is a master fuller. You approach him looking for work. The interview process is simple. He looks at your worn-out boots and your desperate eyes. He asks if you have a strong back and a weak sense of smell. You tell him you do. He grunts. You won't for long. Be here at dawn. You're hired. Your new profession is that of a fuller. When wool cloth is first woven on a loom, it's a loose, greasy, and rather flimsy material. It's full of natural oils like lanolin, dirt from the shearing floor, and other impurities. The fuller's job is to transform this raw fabric into the thick, durable, weather-resistant felted wool that is prized throughout Christendom. This process is called fulling or walking, and you are about to learn why. At dawn the next day, the master leads you into a long, damp, cavernous room. The air is thick with a sharp, acrid stench that makes your eyes water. It's the unmistakable weapon-grade aroma of stale urine. You've gone from dealing with solid human waste to liquid human waste. It's not exactly climbing the career ladder, more like sliding sideways on a very unpleasant slime. In the center of the room are several large, shallow stone vats, each filled with a soupy, churning mass of gray liquid and what looks like giant, soggy blankets. The master explains that the key to cleaning the natural grease from wool is ammonia. And the most readily available source of ammonia in the medieval world is aged human urine. This is a quirky and frankly genius tidbit of medieval recycling. The fullers didn't produce the urine themselves, they bought it. Households would keep a pot for collecting their family's contributions. This chamber lye would then be collected by the fuller's apprentices and left to ferment in large clay pots, which strengthened the ammonia content. It was a town-wide system of turning a waste product into a vital industrial chemical. Your job is to get into one of those vats. The master points to one where a new batch of woven cloth has just been laid. Get in and walk, he commands. Hesitantly, you roll up your tunic, take a deep, regrettable breath, and step into the vat. The liquid is cold and slimy. The wool under your feet is a squelching, heavy mass. And now you walk. You stomp, you tread, you march in place, your bare feet pounding the cloth against the bottom of the vat. Another young lad gets in with you, and you find a rhythm, stomping up and down, for hours on end. It's like a rustic grape-stomping festival, only instead of producing a fine wine, you're producing a slightly less greasy blanket and a powerful urge to burn your own trousers. This ancient, foot-powered method is how the job was done for centuries. Historians still argue about the social and economic effects of the later transition from this manual walking to the use of great, water-powered fulling mills, where huge wooden hammers did the stomping for you. The mills were faster and required less manpower, but some purists claimed that the gentle, rhythmic work of human feet produced a superior, softer cloth. You, however, are part of the old way. Your feet are the machines. The work is brutally monotonous. Your legs and back ache. The smell is a constant assault, but it's different from your other jobs. You look around. You are not alone in a dark pit or a misty fen. You are not an outcast shunned by a whole village. You are part of a team working in a noisy, stinking, but productive enterprise. You are turning something raw into something valuable. The stench is not the smell of decay or disease. It's the smell of industry. And as you stomp away, finding a strange, meditative rhythm in the slosh and pound of the work, you feel a flicker of something you haven't felt in a very long time, a sense of purpose. Hours pass. The sun climbs higher in the sky, its rays slicing through the dusty, steam-filled air of the workshop. Your feet and calves are sore, but your body has fallen into the rhythm of the work. Stomp, turn, stomp, turn. The initial, overwhelming shock of the smell has subsided into a dull, constant background note, a scent you now associate with earning a wage. An older man, a journeyman with a weary but knowing look in his eyes, sees you flagging. He gives you a slight nod. You're doing more than just washing it, you know, he says over the rhythmic thumping of feet and the distant rumble of the river. You're making it cloth. He explains the surprising science behind your foul-smelling task. It turns out you're not just stomping in pea-soaked laundry, you're a vital catalyst in an advanced chemical process. It sounds much better when you put it that way. You might even ask for a new job title: Senior Ammonia-Based Agitation Technician. The ammonia in the stale urine, he tells you, is a powerful alkali that acts as a detergent, breaking down the lanolin, that stubborn natural grease found in wool. But the real magic happens with the stomping. Each wool fiber, too small for the eye to see, is covered in tiny, overlapping scales, like the shingles on a roof. Your relentless stomping, the agitation, makes these scales open up and interlock with the scales of the fibers next to them. This is what thickens the cloth, shrinking it and turning it from a flimsy, open weave into a dense, tight, felted fabric that can stand up to wind and rain. And it isn't just urine. Occasionally, the master fuller will throw a shovelful of a fine, grey powder into the vat. This is another quirky tidbit of the trade, fuller's earth. It's a special type of absorbent clay that is remarkably effective at drawing out oils and impurities from the cloth, working with the ammonia to get the wool squeaky clean. Its quality and use were often a trade secret. When the shift ends, you clamber out of the vat, your feet prune-like and alarmingly clean. You share a simple meal of bread and cheese with the other workers, and it's here that you learn about the social side of the trade. You aren't just a worker, you are part of a complex and highly organized system. Your world is run by the guilds. This is a mainstream historical fact. Medieval towns were dominated by these powerful associations of craftsmen and merchants. The Fullers Guild in this town controls everything. It sets the quality standards for finished cloth, fixes the prices, and strictly regulates who is allowed to practice the trade. The guild is like a combination of a trade union, a very strict country club, and a secret society with really boring secrets, mostly about the correct way to treat greasy wool. The path to success is long and rigidly defined. You look at the 7-year-old apprentice sweeping the floor and realize he's technically got a clearer career path than you do. Your current trajectory is man who stands in the bad water. That boy is an apprentice, bound to the master for 7 years. He lives in the master's house, works without wages, and in return learns the mysteries of the trade. Once he's completed his term, he'll become a journeyman, like the man who spoke to you. He'll be free to travel and work for other masters, earning a daily wage. A journée, which is French for day, is where the word comes from. Finally, if a journeyman is skilled enough and saves enough money, he can produce a masterpiece, a piece of work so perfect it proves his fitness to the elders of the guild. If they approve, he becomes a master himself, allowed to open his own shop, take on apprentices, and get rich from the stinky, back-breaking labor of others. It's a rigid system designed to protect its members and ensure quality. Historians still argue about the true nature of guilds. Were they primarily economic cartels designed to protect the interests of the masters and limit competition, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to break in? Or were they benevolent fraternities focused on maintaining high standards and providing a social safety net, taking care of the widows and orphans of their members? Looking at the weary journeyman and the wealthy master, you suspect the truth is a bit of both. You finish your first full day exhausted, aching, and still reeking of ammonia, but with a new understanding. You are not just stomping cloth. You are the first, essential gear in a great machine that produces wealth for kings and merchants. You are part of a system with its own science, its own rules, its own ladder to success. And tomorrow, you will get up and do it all again, taking your place in the vat, a tiny, crucial part of the great, stinking, glorious engine of the wool trade. Your day of stomping is done. As you watch, two strong journeymen heave the massive, sodden blanket of wool out of your vat. It is unrecognizable from the loose, greasy textile that went in. It is now a thick, heavy, felted mass, dripping a foul-smelling grey water onto the floor. The cloth is carried away from your vat, dripping and humbled. It's having its walk of shame before it gets a major glow-up and pretends it never knew you. Your direct, physical contribution to its journey is over, but for the first time, you stick around to see what happens next, to follow the product you helped create. The wet cloth is hauled outside to a large, open field next to the workshop. The field is filled with dozens of huge wooden frames looking like skeletal walls. These are tenter grounds. The journeymen begin the arduous process of stretching your cloth across one of these massive tenter frames. They fasten the edges of the wet wool onto a series of sharp L-shaped tenterhooks all along the frame. They pull the cloth taut, stretching it so it will dry smooth, straight, and to a uniform, regulated width. This process, a mainstream fact of the industry, is the origin of the English phrase to be on tenterhooks, to be held in a state of tension and suspense, just like the cloth. Seeing the fabric stretched so tight, you finally understand the phrase. It's a feeling you know well, usually around payday or whenever the master fuller is in a bad mood. The cloth hangs there for a day or two, drying in the wind and sun. Once it's dry, it's taken down and moved to the next stage of its transformation. The surface, after all that stomping and felting, is a bit rough and uneven. It needs to be softened. You follow the cloth into another part of the workshop, where a different kind of craftsman sits. His job is to raise the nap. To do this, he uses a fascinating and quirky natural tool, the teasel. A teasel is the spiky, dried head of a thistle-like plant. These bristly heads are set into small wooden frames, and the worker gently, methodically brushes the entire surface of the cloth. This action pulls at the fibers, raising a soft, fluffy nap on the surface, like the fuzz on a peach. For centuries, people tried to invent an artificial metal version of the teasel, but they always failed. The metal spikes would be too harsh, tearing the delicate cloth. The beauty of the natural teasel is that its spikes are just strong enough to raise the nap, but will break before they can damage the wool, making it the perfect tool for the job. But now the cloth, while soft, looks shaggy and uneven. It needs one final, highly skilled touch. It is passed to the shearer. In a quiet, well-lit corner of the workshop, a man with immense forearms wields a monstrous pair of shears. They are huge, heavy, and razor-sharp, looking more like a garden tool for a giant than something for delicate textile work. With incredible precision and a steady hand, he skims the shears across the surface of the fabric, trimming the raised nap to a perfectly smooth, uniform finish. This is the most nerve-wracking part of the entire process. One slip, one moment of inattention, and he could gouge the cloth, ruining a bolt of fabric that is worth more than you might earn in a year. This guy is essentially the world's most stressed-out barber, giving a haircut to a client that costs more than his house. No pressure, and then it is done. The master fuller inspects the final product. What was once a greasy, loose, smelly mess is now a bolt of fine English broadcloth. It is smooth, dense, soft to the touch, and incredibly strong. It is a luxury item, the pinnacle of textile technology. You watch as this very bolt is carefully folded and sold to a wealthy merchant, who will likely have it dyed a brilliant scarlet or a deep blue before exporting it to the markets of Europe. A French nobleman or a Florentine banker will pay a fortune to have a coat made from the very fabric that you were stomping in a vat of urine just a few days ago. The scale of the operation, from your filthy feet to a king's new clothes, is staggering. This highly organized division of labor raises a question that historians still argue about. Was the English cloth trade a proto-industrial system? Was it merely a collection of distinct crafts working in sequence, or does this high level of coordination, from the spinners in the countryside to the weavers, fullers, dyers, and shearers in the towns, represent an early pre-steam engine version of a factory production line? As you collect your meager wages for the week, you look at your raw, chapped feet. You have played your part, but you realize you will never move up in this world. You are not an apprentice, you are just muscle. The thought of spending the rest of your life reeking of ammonia, your only purpose to serve as a human washing machine, has lost its charm. You've worked with the filth of the city, the blood of the marsh, the sins of the dead, and the waste of the town. You wonder what's left. Perhaps there's a job that offers not grime or danger, but proximity to power. A role so strange, so intimate, it could only exist in the bizarre world of a royal court. You decide to seek a new fortune, one that might just get you inside the palace gates. You leave the world of wool and urine behind, pooling your meager savings for a journey to the heart of the kingdom, the capital. You have decided that if you must serve, you will serve at the top. You are tired of being a cog in a machine that profits others. You want to get close to the engine itself. After weeks of travel, you arrive. The city is a sprawling, chaotic metropolis, but rising above it all is the royal palace, a fairy tale construction of towers and turrets. It seems an impossible fortress to breach, but your unique and frankly bizarre work history is about to pay off in the most unexpected way. Your resume is basically a list of things you've cleaned that no one else would touch. Apparently, this qualifies you for a job at court. Through a stroke of luck so absurd it feels like a dream, perhaps a distant cousin of a guard, a recommendation from a merchant who admired your tolerance for foulness, you land a position. It is the lowest, most undesirable job within the most exclusive part of the court, the King's Privy Chamber. The previous holder of your new office met an untimely end, and a replacement was needed urgently. No ambitious young nobleman wanted this particular role, leaving the door open for someone with a strong stomach and no social standing to protect. You are ushered into a world unlike anything you have ever imagined. The air here doesn't smell of filth or industry. It smells of beeswax, roasted meats, and expensive, imported spices. The floors aren't dirt or splintery wood, but are covered in thick, brilliantly colored tapestries from Flanders. Sunlight streams not through oiled parchment, but through actual glass windows. You have stepped from the grim reality of your life into a storybook. A stern, impeccably dressed courtier, the Lord Chamberlain's secretary, explains your new duties. Your official title, he informs you, is Groom of the King's Close Stool. Groom of the Stool. It sounds much nicer than Royal Bathroom Valet, but the job description is pretty much the same. The close stool is the King's personal portable toilet. It is not a dank privy at the bottom of a garden, but a magnificent piece of furniture. A heavy wooden box, padded with velvet and silk, with a hinged lid and a pewter chamber pot nestled inside. It is, without a doubt, the most luxurious toilet in the entire kingdom. And it is your entire world. Your job is to attend the king during his most private, intimate moments. You are responsible for the stool's upkeep, for its cleanliness, for having it ready whenever and wherever His Majesty might require it. You provide the bowls of water for washing, the fine linen towels for drying. You are, in essence, the king's personal hygiene attendant. This position, the groom of the stool, is a very real, and in later centuries, an incredibly powerful one. This is a mainstream historical fact of the English court. While you are starting at its most humble origins, the role would evolve into one of the most coveted appointments available, a position of immense power granted only to high-ranking noblemen. Why? Because it gave a man something no one else had: regular, intimate, and informal access to the most powerful person in the land. Your duties extend beyond simply providing towels. You are also the first line of diagnostic medicine for the monarch. You are to be the keeper of the royal bowel movement. It's a heavy responsibility. The health of the entire kingdom could, in a way, rest on what you observe each morning. You're basically a scientist, but your lab is a toilet. You are expected to note the king's daily excretions, their color, consistency, and smell, and report any changes to the royal physician. In an age where the inner workings of the body were a mystery, a king's stool was seen as a vital barometer of his health and humor balance. The role comes with its own quirky details. You are also in charge of the king's other toiletries. You might be responsible for burning sweet herbs like chamomile or rosemary in the room to mask any unpleasant odors. You are in charge of a traveling chest that contains the close stool and all its related equipment, ready to be packed up and taken with the king on his royal progresses around the country. The king's toilet follows the king. The precise moment this job transformed from a menial task to a high-status honor is something historians still argue about. Was the groom of the stool always a position of some trust, even in its early days? Or did its status dramatically inflate under a specific dynasty? The debate continues. Was the role's evolution a gradual process under the Yorkist kings, or was it a deliberate policy of the Tudors to place their most trusted friends and allies in this most intimate of positions? For you, in this moment, it is not about status. It is about the surreal, terrifying reality of the job. The secretary finishes his explanation. The king will call for you shortly. Be ready. He leaves you standing alone in a small antechamber, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. You look at your hands, hands that have hauled waste, collected leeches, and stomped wool. They are now to attend to a king. A bell rings in the distance, a soft, silver chime. It is the summons. You take a deep breath, gather the required towels and a basin of rose-scented water, and walk towards the king's bedchamber. You are about to meet the man who holds the power of life and death over everyone in the kingdom, and you are going to do it while he is on the toilet. You push the chamber door open and step inside. The room is lavish, dominated by a huge canopy-draped bed. And there, sitting by the fire in a heavy robe, is the king. He looks like a man, older than you expected, his face etched with the worries of his kingdom. He looks up as you enter, his gaze barely registering you. You are a function, not a person. You've gone from being ignored by peasants to being ignored by the king himself. In the world of medieval social climbing, this is a significant upgrade. Wordlessly, you place the close stool near him, discreetly positioned behind a carved screen. You arrange the water basin and the towels on a small table. You do your work with a quiet efficiency you didn't know you possessed. There is a strange intimacy in the silence. The king is vulnerable, and you are the sole witness. You are invisible, yet essential. When the task is complete, you help him wash his hands, and then you discreetly remove the chamber pot, clean it, and return the stool to its place. You have survived your first royal duty. Days turn into weeks. The ritual becomes routine. You learn the king's moods, his habits, his size, and you begin to understand the source of your potential power. While dukes and earls must beg for a formal audience in the crowded throne room, You have an audience every single day. In these quiet moments, the king is not a monarch. He is simply a man. He might mutter about a frustrating treaty, complain about the fit of his new doublet, or ask a simple question, not of a courtier, but of the only other person in the room. Your influence starts small. A desperate baron, unable to get an audience, slips you a silver coin to place his written petition on a table where the king might see it. You do, and the king sees it. Another time, a duchess begs you to mention her son's name for a vacant post. You do, casually remarking that you overheard the young man is a fine horseman. You're the world's most powerful receptionist. You can't approve policy, but you can decide which desperate lord gets to have his petition accidentally fall into the king's line of sight. He starts talking to you. At first, it's just complaints about the food. Then it's about his annoying cousin, the Duke of York. Soon, you're his go-to person for unguarded thoughts. You've become his royal diary, but one that can bring him a fresh towel. This unique relationship is the foundation upon which your future is built. The trust, born of a shared, private vulnerability, is absolute. Historians still argue about the true emotional dynamic of this relationship. Was the king's trust in his groom a genuine friendship born of intimacy, or was it a pragmatic reliance on a servant who knew too much to be dismissed? This leads to even greater responsibilities. One day, the king entrusts you with a quirky but vital part of his finances, the privy purse. This is his private fund, his personal pocket money, separate from the great treasury of the realm. You are now in charge of paying his tailors, settling his gambling losses, and buying his personal gifts. You have gone from cleaning toilets to being the king's private banker. The power of this role would reach its zenith under the Tudor kings. The mainstream history of the position is one of ever-increasing influence. Sir Anthony Denny, the groom of the stool to King Henry VIII, became one of the most powerful men in England. As the king's health failed, Denny was given control of the dry stamp, a replica of the king's signature used to approve official documents. It meant he could effectively act on the king's behalf, making him a de facto ruler in the king's final days. You are at the beginning of that path. You are no longer the gong farmer, the leech collector, the sin eater, or the fuller. You have completed a journey through the strangest jobs the medieval world has to offer. Each one was a lesson in survival, a step on a bizarre ladder that has led you here to the quiet, velvet-lined chamber of power. You are the groom of the king's closed stool. You are the keeper of the royal secrets. And in this strange, intoxicating world, that makes you a very important person indeed. Your hands may still be doing a dirty job, but now they are the hands that hold the keys to the kingdom. The world of these strange professions now begins to fade, the sounds of the palace, the workshop, and the marsh melting away into the gentle quiet of your own room. The journey is over. The tales of the gong farmer descending into the dark, of the leech collector standing still in the cool water, of the sin eater walking his lonely path, of the fuller finding rhythm in his toil, and of the groom finding power in the silence, they can all recede now, like a tide going out to sea. Feel the solid comfort of the bed beneath you, a safe harbor from the hardships of the past. There are no sins to eat here, no leeches to feed, no foulness that needs to be cleansed. There is only the soft weight of your blanket and the steady, gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Let the images of that other world dissolve, leaving behind only a faint echo, a story that has been told. Allow your mind to become as calm and still as the surface of the fen at dawn, and let the last whispers of history lull you into a deep and truly peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams.